So next we will examine the thyroid gland. The thyroid is the largest purely endocrine gland within the body. The thyroid is a butterfly-shaped gland that wraps around the anterior part of the trachea, just inferior to the larynx and just superior to the aorta. It is positioned directly between the paired common carotid arteries. Microscopically, the thyroid is divided into small spherical structures that are called follicles. Lining the walls of the follicles are the follicle cells. They're also called the follicular cells, which will manufacture and secrete thyroid hormone. The center of the follicles are packed with an amber-colored sticky protein referred to as colloid. The follicle cells produce and secrete thyroid hormone. It is the body's major metabolic hormone. Nearly every cell in the body has receptors for thyroid hormone, therefore most body cells are going to be influenced by thyroid hormone. The hormone itself actually comes in two forms, T4 and T3. T4 is called thyroxine, and it has 4 iodine atoms attached, while T3, which is called triiodothyronine, has 3 iodine atoms attached. I have starred T3 because T3 is the more active and more potent form of the hormone. At the tissues, T4 is converted into T3 by enzymes that will remove a single iodine atom. So recall that it is the anterior pituitary that controls the thyroid gland, and before that it is the hypothalamus that controls the anterior pituitary. The hypothalamus secretes thyrotropin-releasing hormone, which is abbreviated TRH, which will then stimulate the anterior pituitary to secrete thyroid-stimulating hormone, which is abbreviated TSH. TSH will then stimulate the gland to secrete its thyroid hormones into the bloodstream. How is thyroid hormone manufactured? It's going to require 2 important pieces. The first is a protein called thyroglobulin, and the second is a mineral called iodine. Follicle cells of the gland will produce the thyroglobulin protein and then secrete it into the colloid, where it's going to be stored until it's needed. TSH from the anterior pituitary will stimulate the follicle cells to uptake iodide, which is abbreviated I- from the bloodstream. Iodide is obtained from dietary sources, such as iodized salt and seafoods. In the follicle cells, iodide is then converted into iodine, which is abbreviated I2. Iodine will then be secreted into the colloid and attached to the thyroglobulin by enzymes. Some of the thyroglobulins receive 1 iodine, while others will receive 2. When the hormone itself is assembled, 2 thyroglobulins are attached to one another, giving some of the hormone 3 iodine atoms in total, and some of them will have 4. Therefore, that will give us T3 and T4. Thyroid hormone is an amino acid-based hormone, since the foundation for building it is a protein. However, it behaves more like a steroid hormone. It is carried in the bloodstream like other steroid-based hormones, in that it is carried by a protein. In the case of thyroid hormone, it is carried by thyroxine-binding globulins, which are abbreviated TBGs. These are special proteins that help transport it in the bloodstream. It also functions like a steroid hormone because thyroid hormone has the ability to cross the plasma membrane of target cells, and the receptors for the hormone are located inside of the cell. It also uses direct gene activation to exert its effects on the target cell, in just the same way that steroid hormones do. Since thyroid hormone is the body's major metabolic hormone, it makes sense that increases in thyroid hormone will lead to increases in basal metabolic rate as well as heat production. The increase in heat production is referred to as the calorogenic effect, and the heat itself comes from the mitochondria, which increase their use of oxygen and glucose to make ATP energy. Thyroid hormone also has tissue growth and strong developmental effects, making it an anabolic hormone because it promotes tissue building. So we saw earlier that 2 hormones are manufactured, T3 and T4. As mentioned previously, T3 is more effective, more active, roughly 10 times more active and more potent than T4. And at the target tissues, we see that T4 is converted into T3 by enzymes. The major effects of thyroid hormone, as mentioned earlier, is that they control basal metabolic rate, which is abbreviated BMR, as well as heat production. Increased secretion of thyroid hormone will increase basal metabolic rate and also increase heat production, while decreased secretion of thyroid hormone will lower basal metabolic rate and lower heat production. Of course, it also influences tissue growth and maintenance by controlling glucose and lipid breakdown, which is also called catabolism. One of the major effects is that it breaks down adipose tissue into fatty acids, which are then put into the bloodstream to be used as a source of fuel. The hormone also controls protein synthesis. So a quick scan of the other functions of thyroid hormone reveals that in the nervous system, it is critical in promoting the normal development of the fetal and the infant nervous system. And in adults, it promotes normal nervous system functioning. In the cardiovascular system, it's an important hormone for maintaining proper heart rate as well as blood pressure. And thyroid hormone also promotes normal development of the skeleton, as well as promoting normal development and function of the muscular system. And finally, in the female reproductive system, we see that it promotes normal reproductive ability as well as lactation. Now let's examine when things go wrong with the thyroid gland. We'll start with a condition called Hashimoto's disease. This is an autoimmune condition in which the immune system attacks and destroys the thyroid gland. In particular, it attacks and destroys the follicular cells. This leads to a decreased ability of the thyroid to secrete thyroid hormone, which leads to severe hypothyroidism, which is also referred to as mixed edema. As you might expect, reduced secretion of thyroid hormone leads to a low basal metabolic rate and also leads to low body temperature, resulting in chills. It causes edema, that is fluid accumulation in the tissues, as well as dry skin and puffy eyes. When thyroid hormone cannot be made properly due to low levels of iodine, this also causes hypothyroidism. Specifically, this is referred to as iodine deficiency hypothyroidism. Since the thyroid gland does not have enough iodine to build the hormone, this results in a reduced secretion of the hormone from the gland. In response to detecting low levels of thyroid hormone in the blood, the anterior pituitary will increase its secretion of TSH. Because the anterior pituitary doesn't know that thyroid hormone is not being made correctly, the only thing it can detect is that the thyroid hormone levels in the bloodstream are too low. When TSH levels in the blood are high, the thyroid will increase its production of thyroglobulin. But because the hormone cannot be made in high enough quantities when iodine is low, thyroglobulin will accumulate in the follicles, causing the thyroid gland to enlarge. And this enlargement is referred to as a goiter. Now let's examine when the thyroid releases too much thyroid hormone. This is referred to as hyperthyroid, and these are conditions that will increase the secretion and release of thyroid hormones. One that we will specifically investigate is called Graves' disease. This disease is a condition in which the immune system produces abnormal antibodies that will attack the thyroid gland. These abnormal antibodies will cause the immune system to attack and destroy the follicular cells, but at the same time they will also mimic TSH. So in response to this, because the thyroid gland thinks that there's an abundance of TSH around, the thyroid gland will increase its release and secretion of thyroid hormone. Symptoms of Graves' disease are exactly what you would expect from increased secretion of thyroid hormones. We see increased basal metabolic rate as well as increased body temperature, which results in sweating. We also see a rapid heart rate and an overactive nervous system that causes nervousness. Weight loss can also result from increased basal metabolic rate as the body burns more calories at rest, which results in the increased breakdown of both fats and proteins within the body to be used as fuel. An additional symptom are that the eyes begin to bulge, which is a condition called exophthalmos. With this condition, the tissues behind the eyes accumulate fluid, what we call edema, and cause the eyes to bulge. Before we wrap up with the thyroid gland, there is another population of cells within the gland that we will examine. These cells are called the parafollicular cells because they are located adjacent to the follicles that produce and secrete thyroid hormone. These parafollicular cells produce and secrete a hormone called calcitonin, which is released when blood calcium is elevated. This hormone prevents breakdown of bone tissue and helps to remove some of the excess calcium from the bloodstream. It targets the osteoclasts, which are the cells that break down bone tissue, as well as the osteoblasts, which are going to build bone tissue. The osteoclasts are slowed when calcitonin levels are high, which is going to slow the breakdown of bone tissue and slow the release of calcium from the skeleton into the bloodstream, since when this hormone is released, blood calcium is already elevated. It also stimulates the osteoblasts to build bone tissue. They will take calcium from the bloodstream and use it to build new skeletal tissue.